Matthew, positional ranks starting up on this show for next season. Today we're going to get through the quarterbacks and running backs. Obviously no better place to start than the quarterbacks as we look at your top 10. And not that different from last year, it feels like. Josh Allen takes the number 1 spot, Jalen Hurts at 2, Lamar Jackson at 3, Patrick Mahomes at 4, and the top 5 is rounded out. Maybe this is the surprise here, Matthew. Number 5 is Anthony Richardson.
Yeah, I think 5 is where it starts getting interesting. I don't think anyone's going to, like you wanted to put Lamar over Jalen Hurts because you're worried about the rushing touchdown loss with the addition of Saquon Barkley and the loss of Jason Kelce. Because so much of Jalen Hurts' fantasy production last year was on the tush-push, on those touchdowns that he gets from then. So if he loses 3, 4, 5 of those over the course of a year, like that is significant, right? So I think, but most people have those 4 in some sort of order. 5 is where, because you get into Anthony Richardson, who last year, had 20 more fantasy points in every full game he played last year. He only played 2 full games. Right? So he had such a small, he was great, but it was such a small sample size. Now they've added some weapons for him, but I think that's the question, like, could you see C.J. Stroud over him? Could you see a healthy Joe Burrow over him? I think you could make an argument for Kyler Murray over him. So I think 5 is when it starts getting interesting, and I feel like they're all really bunched up there. But I put Richardson at 5 ultimately because of the upside there. The dude got 38% of his team's red zone rush attempts last year when he was out there. Again, four games, but my feeling is that while, they added Mitchell in the draft, but ultimately, this is still going to be a run-first team where he's going to be the focal point of the offense.
To me, the most interesting guy in that top 4, the tier 1, in a way, is Lamar Jackson, where I feel like Lamar Jackson, despite winning the MVP with 49 out of 50 votes, it feels like he kind of had, fantasy-wise, not a super inspiring season. I think a lot of that, though, is that I'm not sure this is correct, but I think the Ravens never trailed by more than 7 points in a game the entire season. So they were just in run scripts the entire year. So you didn't have Lamar Jackson just balling out doing crazy Lamar Jackson games because they never needed him to drop back 40 times and throw. So I think there's some upside there. And even with that, even with the game script in theory working against him a little bit, he was still 3rd among quarterbacks in points per game. Well, he was actually 4th because Joe Flacco was 3rd, which just sears my eyes to see that Joe Flacco was 3rd in fantasy points per game.
The problem with Lamar Jackson is that at the end of the year, the numbers are always going to be there. Like, he's never had less than 20 fantasy points. He's never averaged less than 20 fantasy points per game as a starter in his NFL career. The problem with Lamar Jackson is that ideally, at the quarterback position, you're hoping for a floor. You're hoping for consistency. And Lamar would have these amazing games, and then it would go like 2 weeks where he has like 1 touchdown pass because they're scoring defensive touchdowns. Gus Edwards is getting into the end zone a couple of times, and all of a sudden, like, he's just the inconsistency, sort of the roller coaster of his fantasy production wasn't there, even though the Ravens were just rolling everyone. To your point, they were almost too good from a defensive standpoint and from a run game perspective here. Ultimately, I think you're just sort of betting on talent. His second year in Monken's system, I don't think the run game is nearly going to be as effective this year as it was last year, losing the guys that they did. I mean, it's Baltimore. It doesn't matter who they stick back there. I mean, the ghost of Melvin Gordon gets back there and suddenly he's...
They're also just probably not just going to be winning every single game. And they'll still be awesome. They'll still be Baltimore, but just kind of logic and probability would dictate they're not going to be in as commanding positions as frequently just because, teams don't always win 14 games every year.
And I think there's a very strong argument to be made. They're in the toughest division of football.
Yeah, exactly.
Top to bottom, there's not a bad team in that division.
Yeah. The only thing is Lamar did stay healthy for the whole year, which he doesn't typically do.
Right.
That's true. So again, like, I am at 3, but I understand, like, wide range of, but ultimately, he's Lamar Jackson who can win you a week at any given moment. Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotorworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.